The Zephyrian nursery hadn't heard silence in 73 rotations. Across the galaxy, advanced civilizations with technology that could bend spacetime and harvest energy from dying stars found themselves utterly helpless before the most primitive challenge in the universe: getting their babies to sleep. The crystalline hegemony's telepathic soothing networks failed. The Vorthan Empire's quantum lullaby generators produced nothing but more wailing. Even the ancient ethereal collective, who had transcended physical form millennia ago, manifested back into corporeal bodies just to rock crying infants, to no avail. But, in a small apartment on the outer rim of Kepler Station, a human named Marcus Chen was about to prove that sometimes the most sophisticated problems require the most human solutions. He didn't know that his unconventional methods would soon be transmitted across 17 star systems, or that desperate alien parents would travel light years just to watch him work his magic. All Marcus knew was that somewhere in the station's residential sector, alien babies were crying, their parents were at their breaking point, and he had a few tricks up his sleeve that no advanced civilization had ever thought to try. The universe was about to learn that when it comes to the art of soothing restless young ones, humans had been perfecting techniques for millions of years, and they were very, very good at it. Marcus Chen pressed his palms against his tired eyes and listened to the sound that had become the unofficial soundtrack of Kepler Station: crying. Not just any crying, but the desperate, inconsolable wailing of alien infants that had been going on for nearly 3 standard months without a single moment of peace. The sound drifted through the station's ventilation system like a plague, reaching every corner of the massive orbital facility that housed over 2 million beings from 47 different species. Marcus had moved to Kepler Station 6 months ago with his 4-year-old daughter Emma, hoping for a fresh start after his wife's death. What he'd found instead was an interstellar crisis that was slowly driving everyone insane. Emma tugged on his sleeve, her small face scrunched with concern. "Daddy, why are all the baby aliens so sad?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, marveling at how children could adapt to anything. To Emma, living on a space station filled with beings who looked like walking crystals, floating jellyfish, and bipedal lizards was just normal life. The constant crying, however, was wearing on even her 4-year-old patience. "I don't know, sweetheart," Marcus admitted, running his hand through his disheveled brown hair. "But maybe we can help them feel better." Through their apartment's viewport, Marcus could see the docking bay where yet another ship had arrived that morning. The Zephyrian vessel looked like a work of art, all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels that pulsed in rhythm with some unknown energy source. But Marcus knew that inside that beautiful ship were exhausted parents and crying babies, just like the dozens of other species that had been arriving daily, all seeking help for the same inexplicable problem. The doorbell chimed, interrupting his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find Dr. Vera Kowalski, the station's chief medical officer and one of the few other humans in the administrative sector. Her usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. "Marcus, thank God you're here," Vera said, practically stumbling into his apartment. "I need your help." "We all do." Emma peeked around Marcus's leg to look at the visitor. "Dr. Vera looks tired, Daddy." "I am tired, sweetie," Vera said with a weak smile. "We all are." "Marcus, I know you worked in pediatric care back on Earth. I'm desperate here. Nothing we try works. The Zephyrian babies have been crying for 73 days straight. The crystalline offspring are producing sonic frequencies that are actually cracking the station's hull plating in 3 sectors. And the Vorthan younglings." She shuddered. "Let's just say their distress calls are giving everyone within a kilometer radius nightmares." Marcus guided her to the couch, noting how her hands shook slightly from exhaustion. "Tell me what you've tried." "Everything," Vera said, accepting the cup of coffee Emma proudly brought her. "The Zephyrians have this advanced bio-neural network that's supposed to soothe their young through shared emotional states. It's been in use for over 1,000 years, never failed once. Now it does nothing. The crystallines tried their harmonic resonance chambers. The Vorthans used their pheromone regulation systems. We've had teams of xenobiologists, child development specialists, and even some of the galaxy's most advanced AI systems trying to figure this out. And nothing works?" Marcus asked, his mind already turning over possibilities. "Worse than nothing. Some interventions seem to make it worse. The only thing that seems to have any effect at all is. She hesitated, looking almost embarrassed. What? Human presence. Just having humans nearby seems to calm them slightly. Not stop the crying, but reduce its intensity. We have teams of human volunteers taking shifts just sitting in the nurseries, but we don't have enough people, and no one knows why it helps. Marcus looked out the viewport again, watching another ship dock. This one was smaller, more utilitarian, with the distinctive angular design of the hegemony. More desperate parents, more crying babies, more beings pushed to their breaking point by a problem no advanced technology could solve. Take me to them, he said quietly. Vera blinked. Marcus, I appreciate the offer, but we've had childcare experts from 3 different star systems try to help. If they couldn't, Dr. Vera, Emma interrupted politely, my daddy is really good with babies. He helped Mrs. Patterson's baby stop crying when we lived on Earth. Marcus smiled at his daughter's confidence, but his expression grew serious as he looked back at Vera. I'm not claiming I can solve this, but maybe a different perspective might help. I've raised Emma mostly on my own since she was 6 months old. Before that, I worked in pediatric nursing for 8 years. I might see something others missed. Vera stood up, some energy returning to her posture for the first time in weeks. At this point, I'll try anything. But, Marcus, you need to understand what you're walking into. These aren't human babies. Some of them don't even have what we'd recognize as faces. The ethereal collectives young exist partially in another dimension. The sounds they make. She shuddered again. It's like nothing you've experienced. Can I come too? Emma asked brightly. I'm good with babies. Marcus started to shake his head, but Vera surprised him. Actually, that might not be a bad idea. The effect humans have on the alien young seems stronger with children present. We've documented it but can't explain it. 20 minutes later, Marcus and Emma found themselves in the station's main nursery facility, and Marcus immediately understood why Vera looked like she'd been through a war. The sound hit them like a physical force the moment the doors opened. It wasn't just crying, it was a symphony of distress calls that seemed to vibrate through his bones. The Zephyrian babies looked like small, luminescent dolphins with delicate tentacle-like appendages. They floated in specialized pools of a blue, gel-like substance, their bodies pulsing with agitated light patterns. Their caretakers, tall graceful beings with skin that shifted color with their emotions, moved around the pools with desperate efficiency, their skin displaying rapid flashes of deep purple and red colors Marcus had learned indicated extreme distress. In another section, the crystal and young were suspended in geometric chambers that hummed with energy. These babies looked like living gemstones, constantly shifting and refracting light, but their usual prismatic beauty was marred by harsh, discordant flashes of angry red and orange. The sound they made wasn't quite crying, more like the ringing of cracked bells mixed with static. The Vorthan younglings were perhaps the most disturbing to human eyes. They resembled large, fuzzy spiders with intelligent eyes, and their distress calls were a mix of high-pitched chittering and subsonic pulses that made Marcus feel nauseous. Their caretakers, beings that looked like upright mantises with softer features, clicked and whistled frantically as they tried intervention after intervention. Sweet mother of... Marcus breathed, then caught himself before he swore in front of Emma. It's loud, Emma observed matter-of-factly, then walked directly toward the nearest Zephyrian pool. Emma, wait, Marcus started, but she was already kneeling by the pool's edge. Hi, little babies, she said in her soft, sing-song voice. You're really upset, aren't you? The Zephyrian caretakers froze, their skin shifting to curious yellow patterns as they watched the small human child approach their charges. The baby's cries didn't stop, but their light patterns seemed to flicker with something other than pure distress. Marcus knelt beside his daughter, his trained eye taking in details that others might miss. The Zephyrian babies were floating freely in their pools, with no physical contact with their caretakers. The crystal and young were suspended alone in their chambers. The Vorthan younglings were in individual enclosures. Emma, he said quietly, what do you think these babies need? Emma tilted her head, considering the question with the seriousness that only children bring to such matters. They look lonely, Daddy. Like they want hugs. Marcus's breath caught. Of course. It was so simple, so obvious, that every advanced civilization in the galaxy had overlooked it completely. Dr. Vera, he called across the nursery. Can these species have physical contact with their young? Is it safe? A tall Zephyrian approached them, her skin now displaying cautious green patterns. When she spoke, her voice was melodic but strained with exhaustion. I am Keeper Lyralii. Physical contact is unusual after the first few rotations of life. Our young are meant to develop independence quickly. This has been our way for millennia. Same with our species, chittered one of the Vorthan caretakers. Early separation promotes proper cognitive development. Marcus looked around the nursery with new eyes. Every species here had evolved beyond what they considered primitive parenting methods. They had technology to meet every need, sophisticated systems to ensure optimal development, advanced understanding of nutrition and growth patterns. What they didn't have was something so basic that humans had never thought to mention it in any of their cultural exchanges, the understanding that sometimes, babies just need to be held. With your permission, Marcus said, standing slowly, I'd like to try something. Keeper Lyralii's skin showed swirls of uncertain orange. What did you have in mind, human Marcus? Something very simple, Marcus replied, rolling up his sleeves. Something we call skin-to-skin contact. In human development, we've learned that physical touch isn't just comforting, it's essential for proper neural development, stress regulation, and emotional bonding. He looked around at the assembled alien caretakers, all of whom were watching with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. Would you allow me to hold one of your young? Just to see what happens. The silence that followed was broken only by the continued wailing of distressed babies. Then, Keeper Lyralii's skin shifted to a pattern Marcus had never seen before, pale blue spirals that seemed to indicate desperate resignation. At this point, human Marcus, I would allow a Vorthan battle spider to hold my offspring if it might bring peace. Marcus carefully slipped his hands into the warm, gel-like substance of the nearest pool. The Zephyrian baby, no bigger than a human newborn, immediately wrapped its small tentacles around his fingers. Marcus lifted it gently, cradling it against his chest. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The baby's agitated light patterns began to slow and deepen, shifting from harsh whites and reds to soft blues and purples. Its cries quieted to small, hiccuping sounds that were almost peaceful. Around the nursery, every other alien baby seemed to pause in their wailing, as if sensing that something had changed. Well, Marcus said softly, feeling the small alien form relax against him, I think we might be onto something. Emma clapped her hands quietly. See, Daddy? It just wanted hugs. As word spread through the nursery that something was actually working, Marcus found himself surrounded by desperate alien caretakers, all eager to learn this strange human technique. But, as he looked around at dozens of crying babies and only 2 humans, he realized that solving this crisis was going to take a lot more than just understanding the problem. They were going to need to teach an entire galaxy how to hold their children. Word of Marcus's breakthrough spread through Kepler Station faster than a plasma fire. Within 6 hours of his first successful soothing of a Zephyrian baby, his apartment was flooded with requests for help from across the galaxy. The station's communication array lit up with incoming messages from 17 different star systems, all begging for assistance with their own inexplicably distressed young. Marcus stood in Dr. Vera's office, looking at a holographic display that showed the scope of the crisis. Red markers indicated affected populations across known space. The pattern was clear, every advanced civilization was experiencing the same problem simultaneously. It started 4 months ago, Dr. Vera explained, manipulating the display to show a timeline. First reports came from the ethereal collective's home worlds. Then, the crystalline hegemony. Within weeks, it was affecting every spacefaring species we know of. Billions of babies across the galaxy, all inconsolable at the same time. Emma sat in a corner of the office, carefully holding a small crystalline baby that looked like a living prism. She hummed softly to it, and the geometric patterns in its structure pulsed in gentle rhythm with her voice. The sight of his 4-year-old daughter cradling an alien infant made of living crystal should have been surreal, but Marcus was beginning to realize that human adaptability was exactly what this situation required. "Has anyone investigated whether this is some kind of attack?" Marcus asked. "The simultaneous timing seems too convenient to be natural." "That was our first thought," Vera replied. "We've had teams scanning for everything from viral agents to psychic interference to quantum manipulation. Nothing. Whatever is causing this, it's not technological." A Vorthan caretaker named Chitros entered the office, her mantis-like features twitching with what Marcus had learned to recognize as gratitude. She carried a small bundle that moved with deliberate, spider-like motions. "Human Marcus," she clicked in accented standard, "my offspring, Kretak, has not cried for 3 standard hours since you applied the holding technique. This is the first peace our family has known in 57 rotations." Marcus accepted the small Vorthan baby, marveling at how something that looked so alien could feel so universally baby-like in his arms. Kretak's fuzzy body was warm, and, despite having 8 tiny legs instead of arms, the way it curled against his chest was remarkably similar to how Emma had as an infant. "The problem is scale," Marcus said, gently stroking the baby's soft fur. "There are millions of affected babies across known space, and maybe a few thousand humans total. Even if every human dedicated themselves to this full-time, we couldn't physically help everyone." "But we can teach," Emma said without looking up from her own small charge. "Right, Daddy? Like how you taught me to tie my shoes." Marcus smiled at his daughter's simple wisdom. "Right, sweetheart. We can teach." Over the next few hours, Marcus found himself at the center of an impromptu academy. Alien caretakers from dozens of species gathered in the station's largest conference hall, watching intently as he demonstrated what humans had been doing instinctively for millennia. The first challenge was anatomical. The ethereal collective's representatives had manifested physical forms specifically for this meeting, but their translucent, energy-based bodies weren't designed for the kind of physical contact Marcus was describing. The crystalline beings communicated through harmonic resonances and light patterns, not touch. The Vorthans, despite their insectoid appearance, were actually closest to understanding the concept, as their species did engage in physical contact, but only between adults. "The key," Marcus explained to the assembled group, "isn't just physical contact. It's responsive contact. Watch." He cradled a Zephyrian baby named Veltar, whose bioluminescent patterns had been pulsing with distress when they started. As he held the infant, Marcus paid attention to its movements, its sounds, its light patterns. When Veltar's tentacles reached toward his face, Marcus gently guided them to his finger. When the baby's light shifted to a curious yellow, Marcus responded by humming softly. When Veltar made a small chittering sound, Marcus made a similar sound back. "You're having a conversation," observed Keeper Lyralii, her skin showing fascinated purple spirals. "Even though neither of you speaks the other's language." "Exactly," Marcus said. "Human babies can't speak either, but we've learned to read their cues. They cry when they're hungry, tired, uncomfortable, or lonely. But they also make smaller signals, movements, sounds, changes in breathing. We respond to those signals, and they learn that their communications matter." A tall ethereal being named Whisper of Ancient Stars flickered with what Marcus assumed was confusion. "But our young develop much faster than yours. Independence comes within days of emergence. Why would they suddenly require this primitive interaction?" Marcus considered the question while Veltar's lights shifted to a contented blue-green. "Maybe that's exactly the problem. Maybe your species evolved so quickly toward independence that you've forgotten something essential about the development process." The room fell silent except for the soft sounds of babies being held and soothed by human volunteers who had arrived throughout the day. Marcus looked around at the assembled beings, representatives of civilizations that could travel between stars, manipulate matter at the quantum level, and commune across vast distances through pure thought. "Let me ask you something," Marcus continued. "When did your species stop having physical contact with your young?" Keeper Lyralii was the first to respond. "For the Zephyrians, it was approximately 2,000 standard years ago. We developed the bioneural networks that could provide emotional regulation without requiring physical proximity. It was considered a major advancement. The crystalline hegemony abandoned physical nurturing 3,000 years ago, added a prismatic being whose name translated roughly as sharp light of perfect angles. Our harmonic chambers became sophisticated enough to provide all necessary developmental stimuli. Similar stories emerged from every species present. Each civilization had, at some point in their technological advancement, moved beyond what they considered primitive forms of child-rearing. They had replaced instinct with engineering, emotion with efficiency. But something changed 4 months ago, Marcus mused. Something that made all your advanced systems insufficient. Dr. Vera looked up from her medical scanner, which she'd been using to monitor the vital signs of the babies currently being held. Marcus, you need to see this. The neural activity patterns in these infants while they're being held, they're unlike anything we've recorded before. The holographic display showed brain scans from several species of babies. During episodes of crying, their neural patterns were chaotic, showing extreme stress responses. But, when held and soothed by humans, something remarkable happened. Not only did the stress patterns disappear, but new neural pathways began forming at an accelerated rate. They're learning, Vera whispered. Not just calming down, but actually developing new neural connections. Whisper of ancient stars flickered more intensely. That should not be possible. Our young complete neural development during the emergence phase. There should be no new pathway formation. Emma looked up from where she was now holding a baby that resembled a small, furry dragon. Maybe they're learning to be happy, she said simply. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the implications hit him. What if the crying isn't a problem to be solved? What if it's evolution in action? The alien caretakers looked at him with confusion, but Marcus was already piecing together a theory that seemed both impossible and inevitable. Think about it, he said, handing Veltar to Keeper Lyralii and encouraging her to hold the baby the way he had demonstrated. Every species here evolved naturally to care for their young through physical contact and emotional bonding. Then, you developed technology that replaced those instincts. For thousands of years, it worked fine because your young adapted to the new systems. Veltar's lights flickered uncertainly in Lyralii's arms until she began to mimic the gentle swaying motion she'd observed Marcus using. Gradually, the baby's pattern stabilized. But, what if something triggered a genetic memory? A return to older developmental requirements? Your babies aren't broken, they're evolving back to a more fundamental form of bonding. Chitros clicked thoughtfully. You suggest that our young have somehow developed a requirement for what you call primitive care methods? Not developed, Marcus corrected. Remembered. These instincts were never gone, they were just suppressed by technology. Something caused them to resurface simultaneously across multiple species. Dr. Vera's scanner beeped with new data. Marcus, the neural development we're seeing, it's not just individual. The babies are somehow synchronizing their brain patterns when multiple species are held in proximity. It's like they're creating a new form of interspecies communication. Around the room, the alien caretakers began tentatively applying the techniques Marcus had demonstrated. The results were immediate and profound. Not only did the babies calm down, but they began responding to their own species caretakers in ways they never had before. Light patterns synchronized, harmonic frequencies aligned, and even the Vorthan's complex pheromone communications took on new depths. This is unprecedented, sharp light of perfect angles chimed in crystalline tones. Our young have never shown such complex response patterns to crystalline caretakers. Emma giggled as the baby dragon in her arms made a sound like purring mixed with wind chimes. I think they just wanted to make friends, she said. Like at the playground. Sometimes you have to show someone how to play before they can join in. Marcus looked around the room at aliens learning to hold their babies, at technology giving way to instinct, at an entire galaxy rediscovering something humans had never forgotten. But, even as hope began to bloom in the tired faces around him, he knew this was just the beginning. They had found a solution for the babies here on Kepler station, but there were millions more across the galaxy who still needed help. And, if Marcus was right about the evolutionary implications of what they were witnessing, this crisis was about to become something much bigger than anyone had imagined. The babies weren't just learning to be soothed. They were learning to connect across species lines in ways that had never existed before. And, in a galaxy where different civilizations had been in conflict for millennia, that kind of connection could change everything. But, first, they needed to figure out why this was happening now, and whether the same force that had triggered this crisis might have other plans for the future of galactic civilization. The discovery came at 3 a.m, station time, when Marcus was finally trying to get some sleep. Emma had been staying in the nursery, helping with the overnight shifts, and Marcus had just closed his eyes when Dr. Vera burst through his apartment door without even ringing the bell. "Marcus, wake up." "We found it," she said, her voice crackling with exhaustion and excitement. "We found the source." Marcus sat up immediately, grabbing his shirt. "What do you mean?" "The Ethereal Collective's deep space monitoring stations detected an energy signature 4 months ago, the same time the crying started. They didn't think it was significant because it was so faint, but when they compared the data to our timeline..." She thrust a data pad at him. "It's not natural, Marcus. Something sent a signal across the galaxy." Marcus studied the readings as they walked quickly toward the station's command center. The energy pattern was unlike anything in the databases, not electromagnetic, not gravitational, not quantum-based as far as they could tell. But it had reached every inhabited system simultaneously, arriving at the speed of thought rather than the speed of light. "Who would do this?" Marcus asked. "And why?" "That's what we need to figure out." "But there's more." Vera led him into the command center, where a massive holographic display showed the galaxy with thousands of data points floating like stars. The signal didn't just trigger the crying. It did something else. The display zoomed in to show detailed scans of various star systems. In each one, energy readings showed subtle but measurable changes in the fabric of spacetime itself, centered around planets with large populations of young beings. "It's like the signal was specifically designed to affect developing neural systems," Vera continued. "But not damage them, change them. Enhance them. The babies aren't just learning to bond across species lines, Marcus. They're developing capabilities we've never seen before." In the nursery section of the command center, Marcus could see Emma sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by alien babies of different species. But they weren't just being held, they were arranged in a complex pattern, and their various forms of communication seemed to be synchronizing into something that looked almost like a language. "Emma," he called softly, not wanting to disturb whatever was happening. His daughter looked up with bright eyes. "Daddy! Come see. They're teaching each other songs." Marcus approached carefully and saw what she meant. The Zephyrian baby's light patterns were pulsing in rhythm with the harmonic frequencies of the crystalline young, while the Vorthan babies contributed complex pheromone releases that seemed to add emotional depth to the communication. It was like watching a new form of music being born. "How long has this been going on?" he asked. "About an hour," replied Keeper Lyralii, who was monitoring the interaction with recording equipment. "It began when we brought representatives from all the species together in one space. They seem to be developing a form of universal communication." Dr. Vera joined them, scanner in hand. "Their brain development has accelerated by orders of magnitude. Neural pathways that should take years to form are appearing in hours. But only when they're in physical contact with caring beings, and only when multiple species are present together." Marcus knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, what are they saying to each other?" Emma tilted her head, listening to sounds and watching light patterns that Marcus could barely perceive. "They're talking about the big voice, Daddy. The one that woke them up and told them to remember how to make friends." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. The big voice? It came from far away, and it was sad because everyone had forgotten how to hug and sing and be happy together. So it reminded all the babies how to ask for hugs. Keeper Lyralii's skin shifted to alarmed orange patterns. "Child Emma, are you saying the babies understand the source of the signal?" Emma nodded seriously. "They remember it like a dream. The voice is still out there, watching to see if we learned the lesson. Dr. Vera and Marcus exchanged glances. If Emma was right, and the babies were somehow in contact with whatever had sent the signal, then this wasn't just an isolated crisis. It was a test. Emma, Marcus said carefully, can you ask them who the voice belongs to? Emma turned back to the babies, making soft sounds and gentle gestures. The response was immediate, a complex harmony of light, sound, and scent that made the air itself seem to shimmer. When it faded, Emma looked troubled. They say the voice is very old and very lonely. It used to have friends, but they grew up and forgot how to play together. So it went to sleep for a long, long time. But then, it woke up and saw that all the grown-ups in the stars had forgotten how to be kind to their babies, and that made it very sad. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. An ancient intelligence, watching the development of galactic civilization, becoming concerned about the direction it was taking. The simultaneous timing, the specific targeting of developing neural systems, the way the solution required cooperation between species. It's not just teaching the babies, he realized aloud. It's teaching us. All of us. As if summoned by his words, the station's long-range communication array activated itself, displaying an incoming signal from deep space. But this wasn't like any transmission they'd ever received. Instead of data streams or electromagnetic pulses, the screen filled with images that seemed to communicate directly with the mind. They saw ancient civilizations rising and falling across the galaxy. They saw species that had once been vibrant and connected slowly isolating themselves behind walls of technology and efficiency. They saw the gradual loss of emotional bonds, the replacement of instinct with programming, the slow death of wonder and joy across 1,000 worlds. And they saw the loneliness of an intelligence so old that it had watched this pattern repeat across multiple galaxies, always hoping that this time, the younger species would find a better path. The images faded, replaced by a simple message that appeared in every language simultaneously. The young ones remember what you have forgotten. Will you learn from them before it is too late? The command center fell silent except for the soft sounds of babies cooing and playing together. Around the galaxy, Marcus knew, similar scenes were playing out as other species began to rediscover the techniques humans had preserved. But he also knew that this was just the beginning. It's not just about childcare, he said quietly. This ancient intelligence, it's trying to prevent galactic civilization from evolving itself into emotional extinction. Dr. Vera nodded slowly. The babies are the key because they're not set in their ways yet. They can still learn to form connections across species lines. But if we don't change too, then, in a generation or two, we'll be back to the same isolation and technology dependence, Marcus finished. Only this time, the babies will have grown up knowing what we're missing. Emma stood up, still holding a small ethereal baby that flickered with contented silver patterns. The voice wants to know if the grown-ups will learn to play together too. Marcus looked around the command center at the assembled alien representatives, all of whom had spent the last few days learning to hold and comfort babies in ways their civilizations had abandoned centuries ago. He saw the wonder in their expressions, the rediscovery of emotions they'd thought were primitive and useless. I think we're already learning, he said. But, even as hope filled the room, Marcus knew the real challenge was yet to come. They had solved the immediate crisis of the crying babies, but the ancient intelligence had made it clear that this was just the first step. The test would be whether galactic civilization could maintain these emotional connections as the babies grew up, or whether they would gradually slip back into the efficient but sterile patterns that had prompted this intervention in the first place. And, somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus wondered what would happen if they failed the test. What other measures might an intelligence powerful enough to affect billions of minds simultaneously have at its disposal? The babies continued their complex interspecies communication, their joy and contentment a stark contrast to the weight of responsibility that had settled on the adults around them. They had been given a second chance to build a galaxy based on connection rather than isolation, on emotion rather than efficiency. Now they had to prove they were worthy of it. The ancient intelligence was watching, waiting to see if the younger species could learn from their own children before it was too late to change course. And Marcus realized that the future of galactic civilization might depend on whether parents across the galaxy could remember how to be human, even when they weren't human at all. The next phase of the test was about to begin, and, this time, it wouldn't just be about getting babies to stop crying. It would be about getting entire civilizations to start connecting again, one family at a time. 3 weeks after the first contact with the ancient intelligence, Kepler's station had become the unofficial center of a galactic revolution. Ships arrived daily from across known space, carrying not just distressed babies and exhausted parents, but entire families wanting to learn what humans called emotional intelligence. Marcus stood in what had once been the station's largest cargo bay, now converted into a massive nursery and learning center. The sight before him would have seemed impossible a month ago: crystalline adults sitting in meditation circles with their prismatic young, learning to interpret light patterns as emotional expressions rather than just data transmission. BabiesnThen families engaged in complex group pheromone exchanges that created intricate emotional symphonies. Ethereal beings maintaining physical form for hours at a time just to experience the sensation of holding their flickering offspring. But the most remarkable sight was in the center of the space, where babies from 24 different species played together in what Emma had dubbed the friendship circle. They communicated through a mixture of light, sound, scent, and touch that created a form of universal language more complex than anything the galaxy's most advanced translation systems had achieved. Emma sat among them, now serving as an informal teacher for alien children who were arriving daily. Her natural ability to connect with beings completely unlike herself had made her something of a legend among the visiting families. Marcus watched her patiently show a young crystalline how to make what humans called peekaboo work with light refraction instead of hiding behind hands. "Papa Marcus," came a melodic voice behind him. He turned to see Lyralii approaching with her mate, Corvash, and their baby Veltar, who had become something of a poster child for the success of human parenting techniques. But Lyralii's usual graceful movements seemed tense, and her skin displayed worried purple spirals. "Keeper Lyralii, Corvash. How is Veltar adapting?" Corvash, whose broader build and deeper blue coloration marked him as a Zephyrian male, spoke first. "Our offspring thrives beyond our greatest hopes. The neural development, the emotional range, the ability to communicate across species barriers, it is miraculous." "But?" Marcus prompted, sensing there was more. Lyralii's skin shifted to deeper purples. "We have received communications from our homeworld. The Council of Depths is concerned about what they call regression to primitive behaviors. They have ordered all Zephyrian families to return home immediately for what they term proper developmental intervention." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "They want to reverse the progress?" "Worse," Corvash said, his own coloration darkening. "They plan to implement what they call evolutionary acceleration protocols. Forced neural development using artificial stimulation to bypass what they see as the inefficient emotional learning phase." Around the nursery, similar conversations were taking place. Dr. Vera approached with a data pad showing incoming communications from across the galaxy. "Marcus, we're getting reports from 17 different species. Their governments are demanding that families return to traditional child-rearing methods. Some are threatening to declare the emotional bonding techniques a form of contamination." Emma looked up from her play with the alien children, her face troubled. "Daddy," the big voice is sad again. "It says some of the grown-ups are trying to forget the lesson on purpose." Marcus knelt beside his daughter, lowering his voice. "Can you ask the babies what the big voice wants us to do?" Emma turned to the diverse group of young beings around her, engaging in their complex multisensory communication. The response came as a wave of synchronized light, sound, and movement that somehow conveyed profound urgency. "It says there isn't much time," Emma translated. "If the grown-ups forget again, the voice will have to try something different. Something scarier." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the station's emergency klaxons began blaring. Dr. Vera's communicator crackled to life with frantic reports from the command center. "All department heads to the command deck immediately. We have multiple fleets approaching the station from different vectors." Marcus felt his blood run cold as he looked around at the families who had come here seeking help. Many of them would be considered traitors by their own governments simply for learning to hold their children. In the command center, the tactical display showed the approaching threat. 7 different fleets, representing major galactic powers, were converging on Kepler Station. The crystalline hegemony's geometric ships gleamed like deadly jewelry. The Vorthan Empire's insectoid vessels moved with predatory precision. Even the normally peaceful ethereal collective had manifested a fleet of energy-based ships that flickered in and out of visible space. Incoming transmission from the lead Zephyrian vessel, reported the communications officer. A holographic display activated, showing High Keeper Zelanos, the supreme leader of the Zephyrian Council of Depths. His skin displayed the formal silver and black patterns that indicated absolute authority, and his voice carried the cold precision that had made him one of the galaxy's most feared diplomats. Human designation Marcus Chen, you will cease all contamination activities immediately. You will surrender all Zephyrian citizens to proper authority, and you will submit yourself for judgment regarding crimes against galactic order. Marcus stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye in the command center. High Keeper, the techniques we're teaching aren't contamination. They're helping your young develop in ways that silence. Zelanos cut him off. We have monitored the neural modifications your techniques produce. They represent a fundamental alteration of natural development patterns. This constitutes biological warfare against sovereign species. Similar accusations came from the other fleet commanders. The Crystalline Emperor accused Marcus of disrupting harmonic evolution. The Vorthan Hive Queen claimed he was introducing chaotic emotional variables that threatened social stability. The ethereal collective's representative spoke of dangerous attachment patterns that could prevent proper transcendence. You have 24 standard hours to comply, Zelanos concluded. After that, we will take the necessary steps to protect our citizens and eliminate this threat to galactic civilization. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Marcus looked around at the alien families who had found hope here, at the babies who were learning to communicate across species lines, at the evidence of emotional growth and connection that was spreading throughout the station. They're going to destroy it, Dr. Vera said quietly. Everything we've built here. All the progress. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, the voice says it's time for the second part of the test. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, every screen in the command center flickered to life with an image that made everyone freeze in place. It showed the ancient intelligence for the first time, not as abstract concepts or telepathic communications, but as it truly was. It was vast beyond comprehension, an entity that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. Its form suggested great age and infinite patience, but also profound sadness. Around it, the remnants of countless civilizations floated like memories, species that had chosen efficiency over emotion, technology over connection, and had ultimately faded into sterile extinction. When it spoke, its voice resonated directly in their minds, bypassing language entirely. The young ones have learned. They remember the joy of connection, the power of understanding across differences, the strength that comes from emotional bonds. But the elder systems resist. They fear change more than they love growth. The image shifted to show the approaching fleets, their weapons charging, their intentions clear. I offer one final choice. The path of connection, where differences become strengths and emotional bonds enable growth beyond current imagination. Or the path of separation, where each species continues alone until they achieve perfect efficiency and perfect isolation. The screens around the command center began showing scenes from across the galaxy. On world after world, families who had learned the emotional bonding techniques were being forcibly separated. Children who had developed cross-species communication abilities were being subjected to corrective procedures. The joy and wonder that had been growing throughout galactic civilization was being systematically eliminated. Choose now, the ancient intelligence continued. Not just for yourselves, but for all who will come after. The young ones cannot preserve what they have learned if the elder systems refuse to value it. Marcus looked around the command center, seeing fear and uncertainty in every face. The alien families in the nursery were depending on him to protect what their children had learned. The approaching fleets represented overwhelming force. The ancient intelligence was offering a choice, but the consequences of either option were unclear. What happens if we choose connection? Marcus asked. Those who choose connection will be changed, as the young ones have been changed. Enhanced beyond current limitations, but bound together in ways that make isolation impossible. Those who choose separation will be left unchanged, to follow their own path to its conclusion. Emma looked up at her father with complete trust. The babies aren't scared, Daddy. They know which choice is right. In the nursery, the alien babies continued their complex communications, their light patterns and sounds and movements creating harmonies that seemed to resonate with the station's structure itself. They showed no fear of the approaching fleets, no concern about the threats being made. They had learned to trust in connection, and that trust made them fearless. Marcus realized that this moment would define not just the future of these particular families, but the direction of galactic civilization for millennia to come. The ancient intelligence wasn't just testing their commitment to emotional bonds, it was offering an evolutionary choice that would permanently alter the species that accepted it. The 24-hour deadline was ticking down, and, with it, the future of everything they had built together. The final test was about to begin, and, this time, the stakes were nothing less than the emotional future of the galaxy. The ancient intelligence gave them exactly 12 hours to make their choice, and Marcus spent 11 of them in the nursery, watching the babies play. They seemed completely unafraid of the armed fleets surrounding the station, continuing their complex interspecies communications with a joy that made their caregivers weep with a mixture of pride and terror. Emma sat in the center of the group, no longer just participating in their games but somehow coordinating them. The other human families who had arrived over the past weeks watched in amazement as their own children began displaying similar abilities, not telepathy exactly, but an emotional resonance that transcended species barriers. It's happening to all of them, Dr. Vera whispered, monitoring the neural activity of human children throughout the station. Every human child under the age of 10 is developing enhanced empathic capabilities. They're becoming bridges between species. Marcus held his daughter's hand, feeling a strange tingling that seemed to connect him not just to Emma, but to every child in the room, and, through them, to their alien counterparts. The ancient intelligence isn't just changing the alien babies. It's changing all of us. Keeper Lyralii approached with Veltar in her arms. Her skin showed patterns Marcus had never seen before, swirling combinations of colors that seemed to shift with her emotions in real time. Papa Marcus, my mate, and I have decided. We will not return to the homeworld. Whatever consequences come from that choice, we accept them. Similar declarations had been coming in throughout the day. Nearly 70% of the alien families on the station had chosen to remain, despite the threats from their governments. But Marcus knew that personal choices wouldn't be enough. The approaching fleets represented the combined military might of half the galaxy. Even if the ancient intelligence protected them, what kind of future could they build surrounded by enemies? 5 minutes until the deadline, announced Dr. Vera. Marcus gathered Emma in his arms and walked to the observation deck, where families from dozens of species had assembled to await their fate. Through the massive viewports, they could see the 7 fleets arrayed in a perfect sphere around the station. The ships were close enough that individual weapon ports were visible, all charged and ready to fire. Emma pressed her face to the viewport, completely unafraid. The big voice is asking one more time, Daddy. It wants to know if the grown-ups are ready to trust their babies. What do you think, sweetheart? Marcus asked. I think the babies have been teaching us all along, Emma replied with the simple wisdom that only children possess. They've been showing us how to be friends with anyone, even if they look different or talk different or come from far away. The grown-ups just have to decide if they want to learn. The countdown reached 0, and every screen throughout the station activated simultaneously. This time, the ancient intelligence didn't just communicate telepathically, it manifested physically throughout the station, appearing as a gentle presence that seemed to exist in the spaces between thoughts. The choice has been made, it said, its voice now warm rather than sad. Those who remain have chosen connection. Those who approach have chosen separation. Both paths will be honored. The change began with the babies. Their various forms of communication suddenly amplified, creating a harmony that resonated through the station's structure and beyond. The light patterns, harmonic frequencies, and pheromone exchanges synchronized into something that was more than language. It was pure emotional communication, transmitted at faster than light speeds across the galaxy. Marcus felt it wash over him like a wave of understanding. Suddenly, he could sense the emotions of every being on the station. Not just humans, but the Zephyrians' flowing patterns of thought, the crystallines' precise geometric logic tempered by newfound warmth, the Vorthons' complex chemical communications now layered with emotional depth. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to be part of a community that transcended species barriers. Around him, he saw the same realization dawning in the faces of everyone present. Alien caretakers who had spent weeks learning to hold their babies now understood that they were learning to hold each other. Human families who had come to teach discovered that they were being taught. The children who had served as bridges were revealing that everyone could become a bridge. This is the enhancement, Marcus breathed, feeling his consciousness expand to encompass perspectives he had never imagined possible. Not just better communication or stronger emotions. Actual unity. The ancient intelligence's presence became more defined, revealing itself as a being of immense compassion who had watched countless civilizations choose isolation over connection. This is what I have been hoping for across millions of years. Not perfection, but the willingness to grow together rather than apart. Through the viewports, they could see the change reaching the fleets. Some ships immediately began powering down their weapons. Others hesitated, their crews struggling with the sudden understanding of what they were about to destroy. But, approximately half of the fleet, those whose crews had chosen absolute loyalty to their hierarchical systems, remained unchanged, their weapons still charged, their intent still hostile. Highkeeper Zelanos' voice crackled over the communication system, but now Marcus could hear not just his words, but the fear and confusion beneath them. What have you done? We are detecting massive energy fluctuations, reports of crew members exhibiting aberrant behavior patterns. We have remembered, Marcus replied, his voice somehow carrying to every ship simultaneously. We have remembered what it means to understand each other completely. The response was immediate. The ships whose crews had been touched by the enhancement began moving away from their attack formations, their captains suddenly understanding the magnitude of what they had been ordered to destroy. But the ships that remained hostile opened fire. What happened next defied every law of physics that galactic civilization had discovered. The weapons' fire simply stopped. Not deflected or absorbed, but transformed into something else entirely. The destructive energy became light, beautiful, prismatic displays that painted the darkness of space with colors that had no names. Violence cannot exist where understanding is complete, the ancient intelligence explained. This is the first law of the enhanced state. Harm becomes impossible when you truly comprehend the experience of others. The hostile fleets tried several more attacks, each time with the same result. Their weapons were transformed into displays of beauty that seemed to communicate directly with the hearts of those who witnessed them. Gradually, one ship at a time, the remaining hostile vessels began to stand down as their crews experienced the expansion of consciousness that was spreading throughout local space. Highkeeper Zelanos was among the last to change, his voice growing progressively more uncertain as his rigid worldview encountered the reality of universal empathy. This is not possible. Order requires hierarchy. Progress requires efficiency. What you have become will lead to chaos. Will it? Marcus asked gently, and, through the enhancement, every being in the fleet could experience his memories of the past month. They felt the joy of alien babies learning to trust. They experienced the wonder of species learning to communicate across barriers that had seemed insurmountable. They witnessed the birth of friendships between beings who had been enemies for millennia. The transformation of Highkeeper Zelanos was visible from the station. His rigid posture softened, his formal skin patterns gave way to expressions of amazement and, then, wonder, and, finally, his voice cracked with emotion as he spoke. The young ones, they were trying to teach us. We almost destroyed the most beautiful thing our species had ever learned. Within hours, the crisis was over. The fleets that had come to destroy the station instead became its protectors, their crews volunteering to help spread the enhancement throughout the galaxy. Ships departed daily, carrying families who had learned not just new parenting techniques, but new ways of being conscious, back to their homeworlds. Some worlds resisted the change, choosing to maintain their isolation and their hierarchical structures. The ancient intelligence honored those choices, placing protective barriers around the enhanced beings while allowing the unchanged civilizations to continue on their chosen paths. But the seeds of connection had been planted, and they were growing. Marcus stood in the nursery 3 months later, watching Emma play with children from 37 different species. They communicated in the universal language they had developed together, a combination of every form of expression their peoples had ever known. But, more than that, they played with a joy and understanding that made the future seem limitless. Papa Marcus, Keeper Lyralii approached, her skin now permanently displaying the flowing patterns of emotional resonance. Veltar rode on her shoulders, his own light patterns synchronized with those of a dozen other young beings around them. The Council of Depths has voted unanimously to adopt enhanced consciousness protocols. We are the first species to voluntarily choose transformation as a governmental policy. Similar reports had been coming in from across the galaxy. The enhancement wasn't spreading by force or manipulation, but by example. As enhanced beings demonstrated what was possible when consciousness transcended species barriers, more and more civilizations chose to embrace the change. Dr. Vera joined them, her medical scanner now modified to monitor the multi-dimensional consciousness patterns that had become standard among the enhanced. Marcus, the ancient intelligence wants to speak with you privately. Marcus found the entity in what had once been the station's main computer core, now transformed into a space that existed partially outside normal reality. Here, the ancient being appeared in its true form, vast, patient, and no longer alone. You have succeeded beyond my hopes, it said, its presence now warm with companionship rather than cold with isolation. I have watched for so long, waiting for a species that would choose connection over control. Humans preserved the instincts that others lost, but, more importantly, you were willing to teach without conquering, to share without demanding dominance. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now, consciousness grows. The enhanced will explore possibilities that isolation could never achieve. They will discover forms of art, science, and joy that require the perspectives of multiple species working in harmony. And, perhaps most importantly, they will never again face the loneliness that drove so many civilizations to extinction. Marcus thought of Emma and all the children who would grow up in this new reality, where understanding transcended every barrier that had once seemed absolute. And, you? Will you still be watching? The ancient intelligence seemed to smile, though it had no form that could properly express such an emotion. I will be participating. After eons of observation, I finally have companions who can share the full spectrum of consciousness. The age of watching from a distance is over. As Marcus returned to the nursery, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with crying babies and exhausted parents, with the simple human recognition that sometimes the most sophisticated problems required the most basic solutions. But it had become something far greater, the birth of a truly unified galactic consciousness. Emma ran up to him, her face bright with excitement. Daddy! We're planning a trip to the Crystal Gardens on Hegemony Prime. Veltar says their children have learned to sing light songs, and they want to teach us. Marcus lifted his daughter into his arms, marveling at how this small human child had become an ambassador to the galaxy without ever leaving childhood behind. Around them, the nursery buzzed with activity as families prepared for journeys that would have been impossible under the old paradigms of species separation. The ancient intelligence had been right. The babies had been the key, not because they needed to be fixed, but because they had the wisdom to know what was broken about the galaxy their parents had built. They had cried not from distress, but from the deep understanding that something essential was missing from their world. And, in learning to comfort them, the galaxy had learned to comfort itself, discovering that the greatest advancement any civilization could achieve was not technological supremacy or individual perfection, but the simple, profound ability to understand and care for one another across any difference. The age of isolation was over. The age of connection had begun. And it all started with a human father who knew how to hold a crying baby, and a 4-year-old girl who understood that sometimes everyone just needs a hug.